Hello, friends. This is Lindsay Cross, Government Relations Director with Florida Conservation Voters. I am pleased to be coming to you from my backyard in St. Petersburg, Florida, practicing some social distancing, but still hard at work on issues that you and many others care about in Florida. So we're going to take about 30 minutes this afternoon to talk about the toll roads, the roads to ruin, and have a conversation about this. A few things. There is space for comments here, so if you have a question specifically related to this process or how you can be involved, if there's concerns that you want to share, please note your comments here and we'll try to take as many of them as you can. If we don't get them to them, or if there's something you want to speak with me specifically about, always feel free to contact me at my email address, which is Lindsay, Lindsay, at fcvoters.org. So a little structure for how this next 30 minutes is going to go. Going to talk a little bit about where we are in terms of timing, things that have developed over the past couple weeks. I will give some updates on the 2020 legislative session in regards to how that affects the MCORS process, and end with some ways that you can continue to be engaged. So as we begin, I want to first send a wish out and hope that all of you are safe and healthy at home and dealing with this new reality that we have with this COVID-19 pandemic in the best way possible. We at the Florida Conservation Voters and within the No Roads to Ruin Coalition, which is an organization, about 80 plus organizations that have been opposing these roads, we understand that this is not the priority issue right now, that this pandemic is changing life as we know in Florida and communities across the globe. So, of course, the most important thing is your physical health as well as your mental health. With that said, the toll roads process can be something that is a bit contentious and may bring anxiety to your life. So if that is the case, I want to make sure that you are giving yourself the opportunity to step away from this process. If this is not right for you or your family at this time, this video will be available on the Florida Conservation Voters Facebook page so that you can come back and refer to that. There are also resources and links to articles on the No Roads to Ruin Coalition Facebook page, so you can always come back to those in a time and a place that feels appropriate to you. So first and foremost, we want to be sensitive to the pandemic that we're experiencing and realize that that is the priority of our federal, state, and local officials, and that at the right time, we will be able to engage in this process again. But for those of you that do have the capacity, this is an opportunity for you to have some updates from where we are over the past couple weeks and past several months, since we are not able to meet in person. So first thing in terms of timing, of course, there were MCORS task force meetings, and throughout this webinar, I will refer to the acronym MCORS, which is the Multi-Use Corridors of Regional and Economic Significance. This is the language in the implementing bill. Of course, as the coalition, we refer to them as the Roads to Ruin, but just for simplicity's sake, I'll use the acronym MCORS during this discussion. Task force meetings were scheduled for yesterday in Monticello, the Suncoast Connector, and for today in Ocala, the Northern Turnpike. Of course, those meetings have been postponed indefinitely. We do not know from the Department of Transportation when those in-person task force meetings or community open houses will resume. Of course, this is dependent on so many other things, and we will provide updates as soon as we and the local conservation community are aware of them. So the next round of task force meetings was scheduled for April, and then taking a break in May, meetings scheduled for June, July. The final round of task force meetings, which would be number 9, was scheduled for September. So again, that schedule I know will certainly be extended or modified in some way. With that said, one thing that happened during the legislation is the deadline for the 3 task forces, so one for each of the 3 study corridor areas. The deadline for recommendations to the governor, the Speaker of the House, and the Senate President has been extended from October 30th to November 15th. We don't know if that is purely due to the pandemic or if there's other reasons for that extension, but there may be other extensions of deadlines going forward. And if you see my eyes scanning, I've got some notes on the side of my computer just so I get some of these facts correct. Other deadlines that were part of the implementing legislation which passed last year, a big one, construction was due to start December 31st of 2022. A year later, alignments were due to our local governments, December 31st of 2023, which seems a little backwards, of course, and we'll talk about the role of the local governments in a few minutes. And construction was due to be completed in December 31st of 2030. So again, in less than a decade, potentially 330 new miles of tolled roads due to be completed. And there's some wildlife in my backyard right now. So of course, some of these dates could be changed depending on what is happening in our state and our global community over the next several months and several years. So right now I do want to talk a little bit about some of the legislation that passed during the 2020 session. Of course, the session ended on Friday, March 13th. Midweek, the following week, both chambers came back to vote on a $93 billion budget, and that budget passed successfully. There were also several bills that passed that had components related to the MCOR's toll roads. Of course, not as big as the one that passed in 2019, but certainly things that are designed to push this process forward and to essentially sweeten the pot for some of the local communities which are in the study corridors. So I'm going to talk about 3 pieces of legislation in particular. If you have questions, of course, you can add those in the comments section. So the first one was a growth management bill, which was Senate Bill 410. This was sponsored by Senator Perry out of the Gainesville area. This was a bad growth management bill in many ways that the Florida conservation voters opposed. Some of the goals of the legislation was related to having counties adopt comprehensive plans and land development regulations. There are provisions in the bill that are related to the transfer of property for government use, potentially for the creation of roads or utility right-of-ways. So there may be an implication for the toll roads in here. One thing that is specifically related to the toll roads is specifically the comprehensive plans. I mentioned that DOT is required to provide alignments to any of the municipalities where there will be an interchange or infrastructure related to the toll roads by December of 2023. In response to that, those local communities will be required to modify their comprehensive plans. The way comprehensive planning usually works, and DOT actually included this during their last round of task force meetings, is that you would start first with a community vision, so kind of a ground up effort that would then lead to comprehensive plans, land development regulations, and then the permitting after that. So this is an effort for DOT really to force the local communities to amend their comprehensive plans to go along with something which may not even be what the community is interested or in their best interest. So in Senate Bill 410, there will be a preference for funding technical assistance for counties that have populations of 200,000 people or less. Of course, many of the counties within the MCOR study areas are some of our least populated counties. There's also a preference for areas in and around a proposed multi-use corridor interchange. So again, that specifically references this MCOR project. The city of Chiefland in Levy County, for example, last updated their comprehensive plan in 2018 with a 10-year planning horizon. So this area, for example, would be required 5-6 7 years before their document expired to go back and change their comprehensive plan. So this is an effort to make it more palatable for these local municipalities or counties to go along with this process. The second bill I want to discuss is Senate Bill 1166. This is a broadband bill for DOT, and it essentially authorizes funds from the State Transportation Fund to be used for broadband infrastructure projects within or adjacent to multi-use corridor areas, specifically beginning in fiscal year 22-23, and annually thereafter. There will be $35 million transferred to the Florida Turnpike Enterprise to be used in areas with interchanges and to facilitate the construction of the multi-use corridors, with additional $5 million for projects related to this broadband infrastructure project. Of course, this is something that has been highly touted as part of the MCOR's bill as a reason for this happening. Florida conservation voters and other members of the No Roads to Ruin Coalition certainly understand the importance of having broadband access, but we feel that it is not necessary to create a toll road for this type of access to be available. The third bill that I will reference, and I see that there was a question related to the report that would go to the governor, the Senate president, and the Speaker of the House. So under the previous deadline, October 30th, those three individuals would still be in office. Now with the extended deadline, hypothetically, it would be going to the incoming Senate President Simpson and incoming Speaker President Sproul. So again, moving timelines here, and we will keep you updated as we find out more about those things. So going back to the third piece of legislature that I want to highlight, this was a large state infrastructure bill, which was Senate Bill 7018. This started as an electric vehicle charging bill by Representative Daley, which quickly got broadened to accommodate a lot of other state infrastructure things, and including some things that would be beneficial for the toll roads process and also could put some of our conservation lands at risk. In particular, some of this legislation is related to staging areas for emergency equipment. So in the event of a hurricane, evacuation, this would be looking at prioritizing putting some of those areas in some of those lower populated communities, and specifically looking at this master plan for electric vehicles and making sure that staging areas, there's a priority consideration given to staging areas in counties with a population less than 200,000 people, or in areas in which a multi-use corridor of regional economic significance is designed to be developed. So that is a concern. The other one that we picked up on and fought very hard toward the end of session is relating to conservation easements on agricultural areas, specifically purchased through the Rural and Family Lands Protection Program. There was an amendment added to the bill that would essentially remove the Department of Agriculture and Community Services, who is the owner of the conservation easements, remove them from negotiations, so allowing landowners that have a purchased conservation easement to unilaterally negotiate with a public or private entity to create a linear facility through their property. So that could include electric transmission, it could include oil and gas pipelines. Roads are certainly considered linear facilities. So we have concerns that it could lead to a net loss of conservation lands in our state and make it easier to disrupt the integrity of those working landscapes like ranches and other agricultural areas. So those are three bills that we were watching. We were opposed to at least some or all of the components of those three bills. All right, going back to a little bit of what's happening with the task forces themselves at the last round of task force meetings, which was number 4. There were avoidance maps that were provided at the Southwest Central meeting number 5, which was held in early March in Sebring. A updated avoidance map was provided. Florida conservation voters and other members of the No Roads to Ruin Coalition feels very strongly that avoidance maps are not enough, that DOT had committed in December to providing some draft swaths, which would be not a road alignment in its entirety, but a more localized area that they would allow people to know exactly what would be in the path of destruction. So that timing and that consistency and that transparency has not been there from DOT. We will continue to stress the fact that these roads are not necessary and that the implications to our water, our wildlife, and our rural communities is certainly at great risk, and there's significant financial cost to those. Also, at the last round of task force meetings was a cursory look at public comments. DOT has admitted that they've received thousands of comments and thousands of website views to their MCORS platform, but has done very little to be transparent with the public and the task force members about that. At the last round of meetings, the task force members were given an electronic version of all of the comments, but they have not aggregated them or done anything to really synthesize what the comments were. So that is going to lead me to ways that you can be engaged over the next several months in this process. Again, finding ways that this feels authentic and right for you to be engaged and does not add additional stress to your life when there's other things that we need to be focusing on as community members. But if you have the time and the interest in being engaged, we certainly want to provide these resources for you and to be available to help you to feel empowered throughout the process. DOT has continued to take comments throughout the process. Of course, when in-person task force meetings are an option, we think that is the very best way for your voice to be heard. Since that is not available to us right now, you can continue to send emails to the Department of Transportation. Their email address is fdot.listens@dot.state.fl.us, and we can provide this information to you. We do know that personal emails are best, so if you have the time to write how this affects you in your community personally, make it something that is specific, possibly to one of the 3 alignments, or has implications for all 3 of them. But we know that those are taken more seriously than the form letters that DOT has received. Florida Conservation Voters has provided a letter, an action alert, our P2A action, which you can find on our website in our action tab. If that's the only thing that's available to you, certainly we don't want to persuade you against doing that. But if you have the time to write something personal, we know that that is taken more seriously. We know that other members of the No Roads to Ruin Coalition have had similar emails and action alerts for their members, so we appreciate their efforts to do that. Something that I have undertaken and I've helped other people in the community with is writing op-eds or letters to the editors. That can be very, very powerful, specifically if there's a task force meeting coming up in your local community and you're able to get something in your local paper. Again, with the higher priority health issues that we're having right now, this may not be the time to approach your local paper with that, but it may be a time for you to start getting some of those ideas on paper. So when all of us have the opportunity to broaden some of our issue areas, we can get back to that. And Florida Conservation Voters will be hosting a webinar in April to specifically talk about how to craft a letter to the editor or an op-ed in a way that will get attention and allows you to share your personal story. If you live in one of the study counties within the MCORS areas, of course, within the Suncoast Connector, the Northern Turnpike, or the Southwest Central area, there's still the opportunity to contact your local elected officials, particularly if they are a member of one of those task force meetings. Again, know that their primary concern right now is making sure that everyone is safe. But we know that the local officials are listening to people in their community. Levy County in particular has been doing more outreach to their community members and asking them specifically for their feedback so they can take that back and be empowered to share those comments at the task force meetings. Many community members in the Suncoast region, up in Jefferson and Taylor County, have been organizing themselves and have been doing a phenomenal job of making their voices heard, sharing their concerns with businesses and with their local elected officials. So as we say, all politics are local, and if you have the opportunity to send an email or have a personal phone call with one of those elected officials, that may give them some of the tools to better speak for you and other people in these study counties once the task force meetings get back ramping up. We do want to support the local effort, so if you are part of one of those communities or know of local businesses or organizations that are concerned about this and want to have the support of a larger coalition, we would encourage you to consider becoming a member of the No Roads to Ruin Coalition. Again, we have a Facebook page that is active. We are working on a website and other ways to engage with you. We are doing some prep work behind the scenes so that we'll be better prepared over the coming months, and this is an opportunity, I think, for all of us to get to some of those tasks that are important but maybe not urgent. And if you have time in your day or your weeks to look at a specific issue area related to the MCORS, this could help better prepare all of us for when we get back to these in-person meetings. I see that there are some questions about getting letters crafted in opposition in Jefferson County. So Susan, thank you very much for that. Norman sent in a comment about expanding highway capacity. That's certainly something that we have advocated for, that we have significant infrastructure needs in our state right now, and that these toll roads are not in places where our population centers are right now. Certainly with the pandemic and the health issues that we're facing, I think we need to be investing our resources in our current priority areas rather than in these roads that we know that will bring destruction and other environmental consequences and potentially health consequences down the road. In the comment section, we have a couple links to where that the No Roads to Ruin Coalition Facebook page can be accessed, how to submit a comment to FDOT through their website as well. Again, we would encourage you to like the No Roads to Ruin Coalition Facebook page and share that with others in the community. If you have specific things that you want to engage with me or the coalition, again, you can email me personally at lindsay@fcvoters.org. We will continue to provide ways for you to be informed and engaged through short videos, webinars like this, through our blog. We already have something on our blog about writing LTEs and op-eds, which of course we will expand upon in a future webinar. So I want to stop talking for a couple minutes and see if there are any other questions that are coming in, if there are questions related to timing or legislation that weren't clear or that I maybe did not explain in close enough detail. So David had a question about, are there electeds telling us that these roads are needed? Certainly we see things on both sides, that there's politicians who think this is the best thing that's happened to our state, and politicians who are very much against this and see that there are more pressing community issues that we have right now. And within each of the three task forces themselves, there's a difference in opinion depending on which county you're in, or potentially which county commissioner is assigned to that task force. So if you are in one of the study counties or has a relationship with someone on the task force, I think that's a good opportunity to get to know them more personally and see where they are, and see if there's any movement there, if they're kind of just in that taking in information stage. This is an opportunity to provide some more data to support why these are not good for our communities. We know that construction of 330 new miles of roads would immediately impact more than 52,000 acres of natural and agricultural areas. That would just be with the road and the roadway and some of the supporting infrastructure itself. We know that these would lead to more development and certainly more impacts to our natural areas, to our water supply, to the integrity of some of these conservation areas. Let's see if I missed any of the other questions that we have here. Just some comments. Certainly people who are frustrated with this. So concerns about development interest starting to push a shovel-ready stimulus package. How can we avoid being stuck on the defensive like we have been with land acquisition monies? That is a great question. It's when we, as Florida conservation voters, are working on our legislative report and a budgeting tool, and we know that our budgets reflect priorities. This year, we were able to receive $100 million for conservation programs like Florida Forever. However, the transportation fund is funded at more than $100 million to create these roads. So we can see where the priorities of some of our politicians land. Certainly there will be an interest in reviving our economy, especially if this pandemic continues for many months. I think we as an environmental community need to be looking at green infrastructure projects, things that support the immediate needs of our communities rather than what are more speculative projects like the roads to ruin that we cannot demonstrate through our current traffic projection models. DOT has still not been able to provide the rationale for why these roads are needed. We go back to the I-75 task force study that was done a few years ago that recommended expansion of our existing infrastructure rather than creating new roads. So there are still opportunities to grow our workforce and have jobs by retrofitting roads, by doing things that, in particular, looking at renewable energy projects. So we as a conservation community should be, it's a great idea, looking at some of those projects that could help support the need to revitalize our community, but in a way that is protective of our natural environment and our communities. All right. Well, we're coming up to the end of our webinar right now. A question from someone asking if the coalition is sponsoring a sign-on letter for vetoes for these bills. That's an excellent question. We have not discussed that as a coalition. There are veto letters for several bills right now. I believe that the Growth Management Bill 410 but I'm not positive if there is one for that. I don't believe there is one for the state infrastructure one or for the broadband one, but we could put out some bullet points about the components of each of those bills um, that we don't support. Of course, the governor only has the ability to veto the entire bill, not to take out specific provisions in it. But it's something that we as a coalition can discuss on our weekly call. So thank you for that question. And Meredith asked how we would foresee the task force process and timeline being impacted by the pandemic, and the halt of in-person meetings. That's something that I discussed briefly at the beginning of um, this video. We know that the meetings have been postponed indefinitely, and that the deadline for the task force recommendations, their report, has been extended to November 15th. We don't know if that will mean that there'll be a compressed schedule. The task force meetings, we're supposed to have 9 meetings in total, plus a handful of community open houses. Again, I'm sure DOT is looking at what the options are for that, if they're going to have a smaller number of task force meetings, or if they will simply be extended through a schedule in some way. So we don't have the answers to that. When we have information, we will share it through the No Roads to Ruin Coalition or through emails. Hopefully you all are subscribing to the Florida Conservation Voters emails, where we provide updates on this and other issues that affect our conservation community. So I'll guess I'll wait one more minute and see if there's any last comments or questions that come in. Again, Meredith, good question. From a financial perspective, with state and federal dollars being directed towards pandemic relief, do you foresee funding limitations for this project? That's something that I can't answer right now. The budget that was approved just about a week ago by both chambers was based on economic projections, which are likely to change due to the impacts to our tourism and our local businesses. There may be the need for the legislature to come back and approve a revised budget, looking at more realistic income. We don't know where cuts will be made, if there will be cuts. Certainly that is an opportunity to talk about what the current needs are for our state in terms of supporting our health, our water resources, our natural areas, and supporting strong communities. And when we do have a pandemic, it seems irresponsible to be putting millions of dollars into a project like this that was really politically driven rather than community driven and based on needs and true benefit to our state. So thank you for that question. Okay, I have a correction that the governor does have the ability to line item budget vetoes, yes, but for legislation itself, that is not the case. But certainly there are times when the governor will remove certain provisions within a budget, and that could include some projects in local communities. So we will just have to see how all of these things transpire over the next weeks and months, and continuing to be advocating on behalf of our environment and our communities. So I'm going to wrap it up right now. Again, the priority is for all of us to stay healthy, to stay safe, to be supporting each other in ways that help bring us together in safe and appropriate ways. Make sure that you are complying with federal, state, and local guidelines for social distancing, for staying at home and protecting yourself. We are here to provide information for you. We are sensitive that dealing with this global health pandemic is the most important thing right now, taking care of your physical and your mental health. So we are behind you on that. And when it's appropriate, we will, I think, all be very grateful for the opportunity to get together again in person and continue to fight for this state that we love. So thank you all for joining on. Again, this will be available to come back to, or if you want to share it with your friends, colleagues, or community members, please do that. And thank you all for being in this together.